Hi, everybody. So this project was a little bit more of a reflection piece for me. We write a lot in my classroom, and I have tried several of the different strategies that have been brought up, but something that really stuck with me was the idea of peer review and conferencing. Those are two things that I already do in my classroom, but they are my weakest points, I feel, because when it comes to those two parts of the writing process, time always gets in the way, which isn't necessarily fair for my kids. So I really wanted to try to kind of redesign what peer review and conferencing looks like in my room. I did choose to focus specifically on conferencing because I think I can tweak that more in the short time frame of this class, and then I can come back to peer review later. But I hope that some of you can take away, some pointers through my reflective practice, or you can share anything that you do in your room that might help. So when I was a new teacher, there was minimal conferencing. When I finished grading a student's final draft or the whole class's final draft, I would pass it back to them. They would reflect on their work using what I had said, and then we would move on. I didn't feel like I had enough time to sit with students because I just bopping around and helping, student to student, I guess would be considered, little mini conferences, but there was no formal conferencing in my room. Being a new teacher, you're just so stressed with time and making sure that you're getting everything completed. It was challenging. So from there, I realized how important conferencing was, and I moved into more of like a teacher-led conferencing. I thought that I was getting more from the students than I actually was, and now reflecting back on that, I realized that it was more teacher-led. I would invite students over to the front table, and we would read their work together, but by the time we were finished reading, again, I'd start panicking about time, and then they'd say a couple things that they thought they had done well, and then I gave them pointers and they went back to their seat. What I want to get to is that student and teacher collaboration conference that we've talked about in class, and really just me, kind of taking a step back and listening before speaking. Because as our text had said, we learn so much through just taking a step back and listening to our kids and seeing where their process was. I know in one of the articles that I read through the educational leadership book, the authors were talking about how important it was for us to just listen to the kids. They were focusing on dialogue, and when the teacher asked why the student didn't include any dialogue, she said she thought her descriptive language was enough. And, the teacher kind of took a step back and realized that it was enough. And at that given point, she had, communicated all that she needed to. So this is actually a copy of what I would give the students to put into their writing folder my first year of teaching. And between year 1 and, 2, the student would write down the assignment, they'd analyze their strengths, their weaknesses, and they'd create goals. I would then look in their writing folder, I'd write something back, and that was really all the conferencing that we did. Looking back on it now, it wasn't horrible, but it was not the best practice, obviously. I was so rushed. We didn't have the one-on-one connection that we need to really get our students to start thinking about themselves as writers. It was more, can they sit down? Can they knock out an essay? What's good about it? What's bad? What are we going to do next time? So when it went into more of that teacher-led conferencing, as I had mentioned before, I used something like this over here. And this was the tool that we talked through together. The students and I, in quote, worked together to analyze and work and still plan next steps. So instead of grading the work, I actually read it sitting next to them. And then we filled this out together. But now looking back on it, it really was a lot of me making suggestions and them just agreeing. There wasn't really a back and forth or what did you think until it came down to these next steps. But all they would do is take the feedback that I had kind of spoon fed them and then just turn it into a next step. So they really weren't kind of embracing what they should do next. This document then went into their writing folder or went into their binder as a resource. And then I never kept a copy, which now after doing our reading, I needed to keep anecdotal notes, and I could kick myself for not doing it because I never remembered, what they needed to do the next time. I only had between 30 to 50 kids the past couple years, so it wasn't as difficult to remember each student, but if I had been doing this when I had 90 to 100, that would have been awful and I wouldn't have been able to do it. Due to time, like I had said, this became more of a teacher-directed instead of student-centered process. Not to mention this went into their binder or their folder, and most of the time I never saw it again because, as we know, middle schoolers are very prone to losing documents. So what I did create was a collection system for myself. I actually took the goal sheet from my first and second year teaching, and I turned it into something that I could use and keep anecdotal notes on. That's a more general tool for students. So I have the student name here. I would write down their strengths and weaknesses after our student-led conversation and then write down the goals that they decided to proceed with. I would keep this myself, obviously, because these would be anecdotal notes. And then this would be used in conjunction with a writing folder as a complete resource. I have not thought about what the students will take with them. What I was thinking is creating a document that has blocks for sticky notes, and the students can kind of take notes as I'm taking notes on their thoughts and what we're talking about together. So it's more informal for them, and they can focus more on their work than filling out another worksheet. I really want to make this about making their writing better, not about filling out yet another document. So I was thinking about, again, just a general sheet that they could place into their writing folder with little blocks that are the same size as Post-it notes, and I could break them down into the different types of writing, and they could just stick their sticky note onto that piece of paper and it could stay in their writing folder. Plus kids love Post-it notes, so that's why I went with the Post-it notes. But general takeaways that the locus of control needs to be with our students. In my 5D evaluation tool, that is brought up several times. It's the same in writing. When it comes to conferences, students need to tell us where they are instead of us telling them where we think that they should go, because we learn so much more through them and we learn through listening. Writing is a process. I think I panic when I read a student's writing and it's not where I think it should be, and I want to, fix everything in one sitting, and that's not going to happen. Again, writing is a process. It's not linear. It is going to take time. And the bottom line is that the mechanics will come. I think we get so caught up in making sure that their spelling and grammar is correct, and we're not actually listening to them as writers. And if we're going to create a love for writing and a passion for writing, we really need them to develop a writer's voice and develop a love for writing itself. So I hope that this kind of helped some of you who were thinking about redesigning conferencing. And if you have any ideas, please feel free to share. Thanks.